Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is another iteration of the Try a Story tag. I recently did another video in this vein where I compared stories from 5 different collections to one another. In this one, I'm comparing 7 stories from this chunkster to each other. This is the Best American Short Stories of the Century, edited by John Updike. And I have been reading 7 a year in July, in my birthday month, and discussing them here with you as a way to slowly eke through this collection. So I'm excited to get to this. These are some big name, well-known authors in here. And we are now reading into the 70s. So that's fun. And without further ado, because I'm sure I'll ramble on in these upcoming sections, I will discuss each of the 7 stories with you. Starting with The Key, written by Isaac Bashevis Singer, which I had to chuckle a little bit. I didn't know that he was coming up in my reading when I was rambling about Singer comparing a Sholem Aleichem story to Yentl in my last Try a Story tag video. But anyway, he was the next one up in my reading, and this particular story follows an elderly woman named Bessie, where we quickly see that she is, agoraphobic and misanthropic, and basically hates everything around her and sees herself as like a last bastion of the neighborhood, and everything, and now she's surrounded by thieves and whores, and it's 1970, and she definitely leans into some racist or racially outdated language. She's kind of living on insurance from her dead husband, who's been dead for 20 years, but she's mostly, detached from all life and lives in a fantasy land where she's constantly being threatened by everyone around her and being robbed and so on and so forth, and she can't trust anyone. She goes to the grocery store, her key gets stuck in the lock, and because she can't trust anybody, and also I think Singer might be hinting that she's has a little dementia or something like that going on. She wanders trying to find a locksmith, and then sort of basically passes out and falls asleep next to a church, and has a bit of a I'd almost say come to Jesus moment, although technically there's no other mention of Jesus in this. There's more mention of her, Jewish heritage. But she realizes how wrong she's been in, disdaining and hating everyone and everything around her, and how beautiful the world is, and she feels empathy for other struggling creatures. She sees a lot of animals, and she comes back home, and the super who she sees herself having this big feud with immediately comes to help her, and her neighbors have, looked after the groceries she left outside her door rather than, thieve from her, that sort of thing. So it's almost like this is Singer's version of A Christmas Carol, where his Scrooge-like character sees the light, but it's much more of a pat way. I didn't really buy it. Maybe I'm being too cynical and 21st century about it. Though it does even include a confrontation of sorts with a ghost in a slightly different manner. It's actually at the end of the story, and the ghost isn't challenging her. She's already changed by that point, and it is her husband who has come back after 20 years, and it leaves this open-ended sort of film over the story about, wait, did she really change and, is living the rest of her life now, or did she die, and, this whole change of heart is basically her, ascending to the next level or what have you. So I'm not sure what to do with that open-ended ending. In a way, I feel like it cheapens, well, what I already figured was a pat revelation for her anyway, so I don't know. I guess the story didn't do too much for me. I wish for more detailed character, analysis, and like maybe a deeper analysis of changing societal and neighborhood norms and that sort of thing, and a character who Singer doesn't immediately point out as fat and ugly, as though that's your first indication that she's, a flawed character. So, okay, I guess I'll be a little snippy with this one, but hopefully I'll be reading more Singer in the future. The next story also talks about churches, but definitely in a more critical light. It is The City of Churches by Donald Barthelme. And I would say it's a satirical story, or maybe postmodern is the more accurate word. It's, a very short story, not based entirely in reality, but it's about this woman, Cecilia, who is moving to this town to become a car realtor. And it turns out that she's looking for a place to live, and the man helping her with that immediately points out all the amazing array of churches and how this is such a churchy town and everybody belongs to a church, and it's obviously a big deal to affiliate somehow. And Cecilia is not wanting any of this. The bigger deal is, as things go on and get more surreal, is that everything is involved in the church. People rent out their apartments in churches, and every other part of civic life, including the Department of Education and businesses, take place in churches. And beyond that, nobody lives alone. Cecilia, after all of this, is thinking, well, for some reason, maybe I still want to live here, but I need my own space, and this guy pushes back against that as well, so the place gets creepier and creepier, and Cecilia is like in her head thinking, I'm non-denominational, I want nothing to do with this, and it becomes clear too that, they don't think her business would thrive at all, because they either have cars or they don't want to travel anywhere, they're just so happy where they are. And it ends with this sinister note of them wanting her to stay and already having like a car realtor place set up for her. I'm not sure exactly what the point of that is supposed to be, except that the church is not only, this collective groupthink with way too much power over society, but also that it forces people, to give up individuality and stay with them no matter what. Or maybe the town is supposed to be fake in a way of claiming that it has services that it doesn't really have, like a fake car, realtor place. I don't know. I feel like this isn't the sort of story that would work for me in, parsing out, issues of church versus state, or, too much church involved in state in America or anything. But I don't know, I guess I'm starting in a low mood here. This story also really isn't doing it for me. Okay. I think we're moving in the right direction here with this next story, How to Win by Rosellen Brown. And maybe even any quibbles I have or my own, I don't know. I'm much more taken with this story anyway. Certainly the idea of it, which is about motherhood. And I think this is exciting. It's not something that is usually lifted up, I think, at least in these older collections of stories. But anyway, the mother in this story, Margaret, has 3 children, but she's predominantly focused on her firstborn, Christopher, who has some sort of behavioral problems. It seems to be coded as being on the autism spectrum, although in the 70s they just didn't have the words and for that and everything, but he's a rambunctious child. He has behavioral issues. She's exhausted by him. She is like stuck in this sort of power battle with him about winning against him and making some sort of effect on him as his mother, and so it gets into that fascinating dynamic, that power dynamic between mothers and children, about like, who are these people? Because to a large degree, she is analyzing her child and seeing him as a person, even though it's definitely also through that lens of, I am responsible for this child. But it gets to that idea, like, we don't see this often either, I think, of children being complex characters, and it seems like he really is. The other 2 children less so, but he really is in his mother's eyes, and so that's really fascinating too, and I really like that. But the major thing that comes across is her frustration because he isn't acting right, and she isn't able to have the effect to alter his behavior that she wants, until the very end, when she really witnesses him being brought down, like she's spying on his classroom and seeing the students and the teacher physically assault him, actually, to an extent I would believe that would not be as brushed over today. But it sort of, it broke his spirit to a certain degree, taught him how to lose. At least that's how she saw it, and she was, seeing it in this, complicated manner of, I'm glad, but very unhappy that this is happening at the same time. So there's just a lot of fascinating elements. It's a long story, and it's a rambling story. It's like half like diary sort of entries and half, interactive scenes with her husband, who is of course clueless, and that sort of thing. Very difficult to get into. I mean, maybe people would say that's the point. You have to work at it, because so much of it does read like I'm just reading over this woman's diary, and she's not providing much context. She's just has these asides and all of this angst and drama because she's so in this situation. But it made it a difficult read in that way, and I wish that the author could have done things a little differently, because it detracted for me from the experience. But still, I'm far more impressed with this story. I really appreciate the issues it was tackling and what it did accomplish. I'm back in meh feelings again, even though this is a more straightforward, easy to understand story with Rose's Rhododendron by Alice Adams. The title less easy to say. But anyway, it is the story of a young girl, Jane, who moves with her mother Margot from the north to North Carolina, in the south, technically speaking. There's strange ways of it in the U.S. geography. But anyway, they move there briefly while her parents are estranged, and it seems like for a while they're going to, stay separated. And so Margot and Jane make friends and sort of get to know the genteel Southern life, or what they think is the genteel Southern life, particularly Jane with her friend Harriet. And she sort of, I think, idolizes Harriet's family a little, until it becomes apparent that they're not as genteel as they think, and that particularly Jane's mother, Emily, isn't as happy with her life as it would seem, and that in fact later when she leaves the family to become a librarian at the Folger Library in DC, an actual place, Jane is happy for her, although ultimately Emily has to go back as her husband is dying, so it's like she's trapped again. But anyway, this lasts only a brief amount of time. Then Jane's father, in fact, entices Margot and his daughter back to him in San Francisco with his new job. And so Jane and Harriet, they, remain, apart from one another. They exchange letters that, grow less and less as time goes on, but they do kind of stay involved in each other's lives. And then Harriet herself becomes, a writer with some repute behind her, and so Jane keeps up with her writing. And shortly after Harriet's parents die, she reaches out to Harriet, and Harriet says, actually, when all of this horribleness was happening, I was remembering us as girls together. And, another part of, I guess, their backstories, they talked a lot about literature, but they also rode their bikes and had fun, girlish adventures together and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I guess a straightforward tale about seeing yourself in a different light in Bildungsroman terms as you go to a different place and experience new people. And it's such a weird, I guess, slice of life for Jane in a way, because of, where she is with her own parents and their relationship, although really that's not the major thrust of this story at all. So it's kind of weirdly unfocused or uncentered in that way. So it didn't do much for me. I mean, I feel bad. I researched a little. I think this is somewhat autobiographical, but the characters, they didn't really speak to me. Am I justified in feeling a bit lackluster with most of these stories? I mean, they're in a Best American Short Stories collection, so I'm feeling like, so many in a row I'm feeling meh about, but I don't know. There's only so much time to live for a story to grab you, even a short story, and this one isn't doing much of it either. This next one is called Verona, A Young Woman Speaks by Harold Brodkey, and if I may be so bold, I might say that even the title hints to what I don't like about this story, in that it's not really about characters. I think it's more about themes or something. I mean, it's about this unnamed girl who takes a winter trip from Rome to Salzburg with her parents. She says they're not wealthy, but they actually do a lot of amazing things, like seeing artwork, and like she's sitting with a count who calls her like an English princess, or like an English princess. And she's saying this is the pinnacle of happiness, and she's trying to grasp at it, but she and her parents, they don't feel real to me. It feels like some sort of stick figure, and that seems like what the title is, the Verona girl stick figure. That's how I'm seeing this. It just did not reach me much at all. There were some nice, you know, turns of phrase, some good descriptive writing, but, you know, I'm a character reader, and, you know, there's interesting, you know, subtext here about relationships. It seems like the mother and the daughter are kind of competing for the father and his affections, kind of, but that at the end of it they come together themselves. So that's nice, but, you know, if they were characters, maybe I could buy it more. I don't know, I just, it didn't work. It's been a little while, but now I am back, having read the Chunkster short story of this group of 7. It's A Silver Dish by Saul Bellow, which was about 30 pages, and actually I think maybe I'm finding it to be the most readable story, although maybe I just needed a little bit of a break before, I don't know. But anyway, this story is a father-son sort of story. It kind of starts at the end when the father is dying, and the son Morris is looking back on the ways that his father has influenced his life. And so he particularly jumps back to one incident, but for some backstory, Morris and his family were Jewish immigrants in America, and his mother was seduced, as it were, and converted to Christianity through this complicated means, sort of, that there was this Swedish woman, a rich, wealthy woman, who doled out some cash to try to, you know, entice the Jews to Christianity. And she particularly did this by, like, winning over a former rabbi, who then did the work sort of wooing Jewish women. That's how Bellow describes it in the story. And one of those women was Morris's mother. So he and his 2 younger sisters and the mother became Christian, and the father left the family. He wasn't necessarily religious, very religious in a Jewish sense, and in fact this seemed maybe to be his first racket, because in order to leave the family he had his son paying him caddy money, basically, you know, I guess to pay his own bills. So that's the beginnings, and the father's basically known as a crook and a brute, and everyone else becomes Christian, and in fact Morris is in the seminary for a little time, but his father's still somewhat a part of his life. And then, like, when he's, I guess, a young man, his father comes to him saying, well, why don't we ask your benefactor, this Swedish you know, woman, for some money? And he has this sob story about how his mistress needed money because if they didn't have it, they'd be roughed up by, you know, a mobster in the neighborhood, sort of thing. It's a little questionable, but anyway, they go to this woman's house, and this is where Bellow can really show off his, I guess, characterization of, particularly of Morris's father, because Morris, I guess, you know, he's the narrator, and it's mostly narrative, so he's mostly in his head, but Morris's father's like this kind of gruff, sweet talker. He always sort of, like, has easy justifications for who he is and what he does, and so anyway, he does ask this woman for $50, and she goes to pray on it, to meditate on it, and he becomes convinced that the suspicious servant of the house will talk the mistress out of giving money, so he jimmies a lock and steals a silver plate, or a silver dish, from, you know, a locked cabinet. And there's a scuffle between father and son. Like, Morris is unable to get the dish back from his father, and then lo and behold, you know, the woman comes back and says, I will give you the money, but, you know, the father still doesn't give the dish back. Later on, it turns into an issue because they discover the dish is missing, and they round in on Morris and, you know, say, you know, you're at fault for this. I mean, at the very least, he obviously was a witness to the crime and didn't say anything, and he's kicked out of seminary. It's kind of maybe seen as a good thing, I mean, because Morris himself is pretty atheist, and, like, through the narrative you can tell he's really, he's anti-religious in any sense of the word. So his father like comes at him with, hey, you know, this is a good thing for you, actually. I did you a favor, which it's a roundabout way, because it really seems that his father needed the money not to help his mistress out or anything, but, you know, for horse racing or something like that. You know, the father is definitely seen as either unscrupulous or always sort of running a racket. But I think a broader commentary would be the racket, that it's a similar racket in a way to this whole sort of funnel scheme of Christianity. Like, you know, that it's being financed by this rich woman wanting the second coming, and this sweet-talking former rabbi gets Jewish women to come to the cause. So there's some similarities that the father points out between sort of these types of rackets. So yeah, that was an interesting like part of it, but most of it I guess is supposed to just be texture and nuance to who these characters are and how Morris perceives his life in this strange religious, not religious, racketing community. And he's thinking about all of this as his father is dying and is kind of fighting death a little bit at the end. It definitely also portrayed like certain gruff male sort of atmosphere, and the women were often described in a sexual way and that sort of thing. But I feel like the characters, I guess, are trying to do their best, but they obviously come from a certain point of view and they're not really going to nudge themselves out of it. I guess that's an interesting thing to say about, you know, a story that's sort of maybe grapples a bit with how people use religion. But yeah, I feel like maybe I'm, you know, inched back on board with my little project here, and hopefully I can end this thing with a bang. Well, and the final story for this batch in the Best American Short Stories of the Century is a bit of the breaking of the fourth wall, as it were, because it is gesturing by John Updike himself. Indeed, Updike decided to put himself into this collection. And admittedly, I have a difficult time with that decision, even not taking the story into account. Maybe this just has to go with personal feelings of humility and, like, you know, grandstanding or something like that. Although I guess technically speaking, if you don't consider yourself worthy and you're a well-respected writer and you're an author in your own right, I guess maybe I should cut him some slack. Otherwise, staying with the gestalt of most of these stories, this one really wasn't much for me either. It's a story that brings us into 1980, goodbye 70s, and it is about this couple who decide to separate. In fact, it's the woman's idea to separate. They're both involved with other people and decide that maybe he should live separately, and a lot of the story seems to take place like inside his new apartment in Boston, and he like looks at, you know, all the scenery and stuff, and admittedly I can't get into that as much, especially in short stories, I think, because I'm a character-driven person and you only have so much real estate in a short story. And I do think, you know, people would laud the writing and it would say something about the type of person he is, this guy Richard, where he is living in this apartment. He is occasionally seeing both his wife and his mistress. It almost feels like the tables have turned a little bit and his mistress has gotten more jealous about his wife and him having sex there, that sort of thing. And then there's the whole idea of them having children and what's best for the children, although only one of them has a name, and Richard's concerned that he, you know, watches Kung Fu or something rather than read sci-fi, I don't know. And anyway, it's just about shallow people who don't actually seem to really see each other or care about each other. That's what it seems like to me. I mean, it's a similar sort of story from a white man about him being the center of the world and self-absorbed, and the women don't really do much other than serve him. I guess it's fascinating to think about short stories and how many different types there are and how they might have changed over the years. Like, I talk a lot lately about older stories being so passive and narrative heavy. And now we have flash fiction. We even, though, have, like, the ones that speak to me most in contemporary times are really rich in characterization and are longer stories and, like, have the potential to be novels. Anyway, I don't know, it's just something I'm thinking about because I love short stories, but I feel like overall most of these didn't speak to me. So, you know, I guess it's, and these are all like literary short stories too, so there's a diversity even in the genre, I guess. Maybe that's a positive note to end on. And I guess I'll also end by saying, you know, looking back on these 7 stories, I'd probably say the Saul Bellow could be a favorite. I mean, I clash against the similar sort of old man gristliness of the story and the, you know, the machismo and everything. But, you know, there's something to be said, I think, about the layers of deceit, both in con artist behavior and deceit, and how it defines relationships both with a religious context and also, you know, with fathers and sons. It definitely is a gestalt that Saul Bellow is deeply ingrained in. And then for something a little bit different, I think, that we really don't see as much, especially, I suppose, in collections that are curated by men, is focused, like in Rosellen Brown's story, of a mother's relationship with her children, where really the mother is seen as a complex character, I think, in her own right, because I do think that happened in that story as well. It was difficult the way it was told, I think, especially in the diary entries that were sort of in media res, but it was really invigorating to get that perspective from the mother struggling in that relationship with her child. So yeah, and with that, I'm at the end of the video, and I will be back on this channel in the next few days for my final Am reading video of the month, where I will return to novels mostly, but I think I'll also still be talking about short stories, of course, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.